Welcome to this edition of In-Depth Alaska. I'm Jonson Kuhn, Investigative Reporter. On Thursday, I sat down with Chief Sean Case of the Anchorage Police Department to discuss the progress in dealing with officer-involved shootings, as well as a look back on his first year on the job. Here's an extended version of that conversation. So you're a year in. You started in July, right?
July 1.
Just in terms of a personal reflection, looking back on this year, how you feeling?
Well, first I think we need to do a June year end between the two of us because we were out at our park getting this thing kicked off at the end of June, I feel good. Typically, government moves slowly, and adding new things and making modifications to an agency of our size is very, very difficult to do. But as I start to look back on the last year, there's a lot of progress that we've made, a lot of forward momentum that we've done. We look forward to our June Academy, and we're looking to have a full academy, which we haven't done that in 5 years. And so that says the kind of the message that we're getting out, the recruitment, the engagement that we're doing with the public, it's having an impact. So yeah, there's a whole host of things that we could talk about. Some of them we'll talk about right now. Yeah. And so I think it's been a successful year, but we're not done yet. There's a lot of work to be done.
Anything from your opinion that you feel like, I don't want to say critical, but you feel like you could have gone better, or you're looking to improve moving forward, that that particularly stands out from this last year?
I guess probably a little bit of personal insight on me. I don't really look at things that way. Things that even can be viewed negatively, or that maybe there's a negative spin on. I generally don't dwell on those. I just look at it as an opportunity to kind of grow from it, or change, or make a positive impact in the future, and that's a little bit of a unique characteristic. So I don't know if I can really answer that question adequately. I mean, there's certainly things that we're always trying to improve and get better on, but I don't think anything sticks out to where I'm losing sleep over because I wish I could redo that day. Okay. I think we've been open and honest with the public, and I think the response from the public and the media, our elected officials, has been very appropriate for the effort that we put in.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that point, kind of getting into the issue of, obviously when you started, we clearly had a number of officer-involved shootings, to put it mildly. That was a big situation, I'm sure, for you to have to step into. And as a result, there were a lot of changes, modifications to the body camera footage, or the body camera policies. And some of the things that came out of that, obviously, members of the public were sort of pushing for this the Independent Civilian Oversight Committee. And in going back to previous articles, I had read one, I think last July, that you felt it probably wasn't the right time to do it, and sort of citing these other ways, these other layers in which reviews were made of these officer-involved shootings. I'm just curious, at this point, do you still sort of feel that way in terms of the Civilian Oversight Committee?
Yeah, I don't think that's a necessary need here in Anchorage. And really the one thing that I go back to over and over again is, we have a relatively high sustained rate when we have complaints from the public and we do investigations. We're generally pretty hard on ourselves. We have an extremely high expectation of the way our employees perform their jobs and the way they interact with the public. And in some of those investigations that we do are really around like a culture that we've built here. So, you think of like policy violations that are in the areas of like duty requirements or code of conduct. And when you look at those policies, those aren't all inclusive. Those aren't 100 pages of every single thing that we expect our officers to engage in or not engage in. Those are kind of broad policies. And when we get complaints, which those two policies alone are the highest complaints that we have that come in and that are also sustained within the police department. And so we look at the conduct, and we look at our level of expectation, and there's not going to be a policy that's exactly verbatim for some of these complaints when we look at our employees and say, hey, you didn't quite meet the standards that we set. And so to have an outside entity to come and do that high level and quality of investigations and really understand that culture and that expectation, even though it's not written down in a piece of paper, in a form, they're never going to meet that standard that we hold ourselves to right now.
Okay. Okay. Well, but then we do have but there has been the Public Safety Committee Well, there's a public safety committee within the assembly, but then there's also the community advisory committee, which I believe are two different things, correct?
Well, the Public Safety Advisory Commission is the one that's sunsetted.
Yeah.
And that now we have a period of time right now that was brought forward by Member Rivera to try to reestablish that. So that's something that's existed in the city for many, many years, and then it's sunsetted, and now potentially bringing that back in some sort of form. So we'll continue to kind of walk on that journey together as a municipality and see in what form, or if at all, that we want to bring that back and what role they'll play in the future.
Okay, but correct me if I'm wrong, like Celeste Hodge is part of that committee advisory committee, right? Or the community advisory committee, correct?
So I had a group of people that I was meeting with on a regular basis every 3 or 4 weeks throughout 2024. Celeste Hodge Groudon is one of the people that was a part of that. And that was a group from the beginning that was established as something that I could have conversations that was specifically about, certain neighborhoods or certain groups within the community that maybe felt like they hadn't had access to the police department previously. They had opportunities to ask me questions, and same thing with me. So that group of people I'm still close with. I've established a relationship with those folks. I got a text message from one of them just today. So, but I think we've also broadened that. And no matter who you are or what group you represent, we've really tried to open up and not say no to anyone. If they want to have contact with me and they want to be involved in some way with the police department, our doors are always open. And all of those relationships, and as we continue to grow those relationships throughout the community, they impact the things that we do and the decisions that we make. So it's not just that group. It has grown to be a larger group, and maybe not in a formal setting that we sit down and meet with on a regular basis, but certainly when we get those inquiries, this just isn't an email back and forth administration. I try to meet with those folks and really understand kind of, what questions they're asking and recommendations and thoughts they have for the police department.
Okay, so it's not so much that there is a group of people still, or a committee rather, that's still meeting at a regular scheduled times. It's more of just you've got an open door policy where. But as far as the civilian oversight committee, if I heard you right, you're saying that there could never be a civilian oversight committee that would hold itself to the same or higher standards that APD does? Is that sort of what you're...
Yeah, I believe that the standard that we hold our employee to here at the Anchorage Police Department is extremely high. And in the rate at which we sustain, for instance, when the group came up from Columbus several months ago and we looked at their annual report and their sustain rate, ours is significantly higher than what that particular organization kind of achieved. And the reason is because we do hold ourselves to a high standard, and we enforce the policies that we have. We conduct investigations for every single complaint. And that's another thing. There is generally a threshold on what complaints are taken in and not. I'll go back to that group that came up here last year. And for us, we investigate every complaint. Even if on its face it doesn't have merit, we still put eyes on it and we still investigate the complaint to ensure that it's being investigated and to ensure if there's any misconduct that we're able to address that misconduct. We have no investigations that we just put in the circular file and walk away from. They're all documented, they're all written down, and they're all investigated. And that's a super high standard. And so we're proud of that. So
you feel like anyone that would, say there's a group around town, right? Any argument towards that would be your response, is that the department holds itself to a higher standard that you feel would be seen from an outside group?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right. Now, after the Easter Layoff shooting, officer-involved shooting in August, Mayor LaFrance had put forth, or she issued this press release, and I just wanted to kind of touch base on where some of these things stand today. She had called for a third party to do a comprehensive review of APD's training, tactics, supervision, make recommendations for change. But then in the same press release, you had also talked about a newly promoted captain that would be stepping in August, that would be focusing efforts on police training, continuing education on de-escalation techniques, critical thinking tactics, it says here. those are two different things, though, right? I mean, obviously, okay, so is there still a third party in place that makes those reviews, or has that sort of fallen solely into the, well, he's roughly a year in now, but this captain's role?
So the city, through the municipal attorney's office, is finishing up doing selection for that third party. And we just gave an update to the assembly on that yesterday. Once that outside party is selected, it's about a 6-month process that they're going to go through to get through the revision. So we should see something once they're announced on who that vendor is, and that portion will all be public to include the report and everything that they come up with. The selection process, part of rules is confidential, but once the selection is made, that becomes public. And then the timeline that we've built out for that third party is 6 months. So we should start seeing, and there's milestones that they'll be reporting. So the public should kind of see a progress through that 6-month process. So that's still in place and moving forward. The training division that's an internal thing. We have a captain of training division as one of his responsibilities, and that is an ongoing process. So we've added a host of things. The academy that started in December. We added a host of classes. We'll continue to modify the academy in this June academy, and then we'll make kind of a third round of changes in the December this year academy, so kind of 3 academies in a row to kind of make that transition to the academy that we wanted to shape. Kind of hard to make them all at one time, so kind of a progression. We have to get our instructors trained up, and you're really changing the training philosophy throughout the academy. So that is in progress right now. We'll see the second round of that in the June academy. Our in-service training, we've also added a lot of elements to our in-service training. We've done 1 round of de-escalation training. We'll have another group that's coming up, an outside group, to do some de-escalation training in July, I believe. So we're continuing to work through these sorts of things because, I've said multiple times that none of this is a one class and done or a check the box and then you move on. This stuff it's continuing. And if you train the officers on a topic like de-escalation in January, you got to continuously train them throughout because it isn't something that we expect to just have one time and then the officers will forever remember it and will forever perform flawlessly.
I mean, is it pretty standard that something like the third party review would take this long? I mean, that it's still sort of in the process of trying to get up and moving? Is that usual, or would someone be in the right to sort of have questions about why it's taking so long?
So having third-party reviews for law enforcement agencies is not completely uncommon. We had the outside review for the investigation, and that was a pretty quick turnaround. It was very narrowly focused, and a lot of these types of outside look at departments are narrowly focused, and so they're easier to get up and running. This review is a little bit unusual. This is a pretty in-depth look. When you look at how many documents we expect them to look at, we're well over 1,000 pages. When you look at policies, lesson plans, videos that are used in training, internal affairs investigations. So this is a very broad look. And finding a group and organizations that are able to come in and meet the demands that the mayor wanted to review is not easy. Typically if you want someone to come in and look at internal affairs investigation, there's a group that can come in and do that. But we're asking multiple disciplines to be looked at, which means you have to solicit bids from agencies that are generally pretty large. It's not a 1 or 2 person show. They're going to come in with a team of multiple people that have expertise in a wide area of topics. And that's one of the reasons why we built multiple kind of pieces in the reporting process. So we're not going to hear from them for 6 months and all of a sudden they're going to issue a report. They're going to issue kind of information along the way so the public can watch the progress as it goes through.
Okay. Talk about that, establish community advisory committee. I'm just curious, before we move on, obviously officer-involved shootings are significantly down compared to where we were last year, where I think we're almost about a year exactly from the Chris Handy incident. Do you have any thoughts on why that might be?
So, I wish there was a one answer, and we kind of turn this lever and all of a sudden we shut the spigot off, and that's not how it works. These incidents are so dynamic, and there's human beings involved, both on the officer side and the public side. And so each one of them is different, but what we've tried to do is address a lot of different things so that the officers are more prepared going in. Our training is better. We have an ongoing, almost monthly. This particular scenario that we're doing right now has taken us 2 months to get through, but generally about every month this year, we're creating another scenario for officers to go through. All of Patrol Division is participating in that. So at year end, we're probably going to have about 9 scenarios that the officers are going to go through. And again, each one of them is just focusing on one piece of what can potentially reduce the likelihood of having an officer-involved shooting. I mentioned before, after some of these incidents, that we're going to increase the technology. So we got 2 new pieces of technology that we're going to be introducing throughout the year. One that we already have that's going to allow us to use a less lethal tool at a further distance with a higher likelihood that's going to be successful. We'll try to introduce a second one later on in the year. That's going to require some funding piece. So there's a lot of different things that we've done. And over the long haul, as we look back at the officer-involved uses of force and uses of deadly force, what we're hoping to see is that some of these tactics and techniques in preparation that we're giving to the officers are taking situations that may have been in an officer-involved shooting last year, let's say, and in the future we're seeing better results.
Okay. And I think you touched on this in the very beginning, but I just want to ask, it sounds like as far as recruiting efforts, that's looking good. You were saying that you're almost, like, the academy's almost at a full level for the first time in a while?
Yeah, it looks like this academy is going to be almost full. Our full academy is considered 28 officers, and we have not had a full academy since December of 19, I believe was the last time.
Okay. Any particular reason as to why you feel like maybe that's turned around? Become easier to recruit or find people?
So there's a host of things that we've done differently. One of the things is our recruitment is really kind of broadened. Typically, if you go back historically, we've tried to recruit kind of that military-minded folks. We've recruited those people that were going to come to us as wanting to be police officers anyway without too much work. Mm-hmm. Those folks are still going to come to us, whether we specifically target them and recruit them or not. What we're trying to do is highlight the 95% of what we do in law enforcement and show that there's a broader group of people that can come in and do police work, that they are qualified, that they will be successful. And as we use social medias and recruitment campaigns that we have, that's, I think, what's starting to make the difference. We're also investing a lot more time in the people that put in applications, constantly reaching out to them, constantly keep them engaged in the process, because it is a long process. And a lot of folks, as they work their way through the process, other job opportunities come up, and then they self-select themselves out of the selection process. And so really keeping them engaged has been something else that we've really focused on.
Cool. Let's get into Hope, if you don't mind. I didn't have as much time to form a lot of questions within this press release, but I'd love to just kind of hear, the press release does a great job of sort of narrowing in on some key points, but would love to just sort of hear your thoughts on how this has been going since it started last August.
So our HOPE team, which obviously stands for Homeless Outreach Prevention Engagement, and I think what makes this program successful, you can't just take anybody and say, hey, this is your new duty, and go out there and do a great job. And so part of creating the HOPE team was the fact that we had 2 very unique employees that have a high level investment in this population. They care about this population. They care about seeing success with some of this population. They recognize that some of the challenges that people get themselves into when they're in the homeless population, whether that's falling on bad luck, whether that's substance misuse, whether that's behavioral health issues, they look at those are all obstacles that they can help people overcome, and that's a unique type of people. And so Ruth and Tanya are, they're exceptional people, and we are going to try to add to that team so that we can kind of double the effort. But it's not as simple as just grabbing 2 employees and say, go do what Ruth and Tanya do. It has been extremely successful. We did not create that team to be a housing team. That wasn't the goal, but yet they've housed over 100 people. And I think, and we can probably follow up with community relations to give you what the exact number is. But that's a byproduct of what they're doing. They're trying to provide outreach to a group of people that have fallen on hard times. And we see them in some of our encampments. Before some of the abatements that we go into, we send HOPE in first. And we try to find places for people. We try to get people into treatment. We try to get people medical services. They're acting as a connective tissue for some of these folks to get them some of the things that you or I probably take advantage of. So before the abatement process happens and we're moving these camps out, we have taken advantage of as many tools as we can to try to place people and give them opportunities to be successful.
I also wanted to ask, are there thoughts of I realize you can't just plug anybody into this team, but are there thoughts of expanding over time? Is that a consideration at all?
We'd like to expand it by one additional team. And so that's kind of was the goal this year is to get one additional team on board. So, we've got some months left to still accomplish that. And the summertime months is certainly is a good time to do that. As staffing picks up, that makes it easier to be able to take a couple of bodies and put them in those positions.
Yeah, and one of the things, so that's great, that's something that you're looking to do. One of the things mentioned is the team helped a family from Davis Park Camp location find long-term housing, which is fantastic. I know Davis Park has been in the news often as of late, and it kind of ties into the conversation I wanted to close with as far as public fires. We just did an interview with the Mayor of France talking about, I guess, a new ordinance, but it sounds like more of just adding to an existing code where it would be, people would be looking at more criminal charges for burning negligent fires on private property. And, if convicted, could potentially, if this all goes through, obviously, a year in jail, as opposed to just relying on fines, fees, that sort of thing. First of all, I want to get your thoughts on that, if you feel like that's an appropriate response, and if you feel like APD would be in a position to respond effectively to that, because, there are obviously a lot of fires that get burned in these encampments, and it's become a real problem, at least what we saw this last year.
Yeah. Supportive of the legislation, supportive of the change in law. We will be in a position to be able to enforce that law. I don't think anybody should expect that every fire that takes place out there that we're going to be able to go and make an arrest. There's still an investigative process that has to take place, but it certainly gives us another tool. I think over the last several years, we've been, as a municipality, we've been having a higher focus on the fire danger that we have. Certainly that's been a big push this year with the lack of snow that we've had throughout the winter months. And so this is just a tool that we're trying to get ahead of the game so that we can, first of all, use it as a deterrent, because I think that plays a role in this. But second of all, we do want people to get the message that having a fire in a place you're not supposed to have a fire, where there's a high fire danger, creates a substantial risk to property and the safety of people.
Thanks to Chief Case for sitting down with us, and thank you for listening to In Depth Alaska. Please like and follow this podcast.